If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, don't let that pain define you. Let it refine you. Because in the end, truth always wins, and karma never forgets. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us what's meant for you will always find its way back. Are you out of your mind, Claire? I shouted, my voice cracking from a mix of fury and disbelief. Papers flew from my hands across the marble floor, scattering like the remains of trust that had just burned to ash. You really think you can walk out of my life, take half my home, and then what? Come back when you hear I've inherited $15 million? She stood there, her lips trembling but her eyes cold, those same blue eyes that once made me believe in forever. I deserve it, Evan, she hissed. You think I spent 7 years of my life with you for nothing? You wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for me. The word deserve hit me like a slap. Deserve? I laughed bitterly, stepping closer until the tension in the air could be cut with a knife. You left me when I had nothing, Claire. You signed the divorce papers before the ink on my father's death certificate was even dry. Her hand shot out, pointing at me like I was the villain. You were never enough, Evan. You lived in your father's shadow, dreaming of a life you couldn't afford. I just got tired of waiting for you to become someone. And that's when it hit me, she wasn't here because of love, or guilt, or even regret. She was here because of the money. Because the moment she found out my father's estate finally came through, she smelled wealth like a wolf catching blood in the snow. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. You didn't come here for closure. You came here for a paycheck. Her eyes narrowed, her voice sharpening like glass. You think I'm going to walk away empty-handed after wasting years of my youth on you? No, Evan. You owe me. I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes. The house around us, the same house she once decorated with so much love, now felt like a courtroom. And I was the one on trial for daring to move on. I stepped back, looking at her like I was seeing a stranger. You don't owe love. You don't buy loyalty. And you can't steal what doesn't belong to you. She smiled then, that cruel, confident smile I used to mistake for strength. Watch me. That was the breaking point. That was the exact second I knew this wasn't just betrayal, it was war. And as she walked out, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed through the walls, something inside me changed forever. My name is Evan Cole, and I never believed in revenge until my wife tried to steal my inheritance. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, the son of a man who built everything from nothing. My father, Richard Cole, owned one of the biggest construction companies in the Northwest. He used to say, money doesn't make you rich, son, character does. I believed that. Maybe too much. Because while I was out there trying to build character, Claire was calculating profit. We met in college. She was the kind of woman who turned every head when she entered a room, not just because of how she looked, but because she made you feel like you were the only person in the world. Back then, I thought that was love. Now I know it was control. When my father passed, everything fell apart. The will got delayed in court, the company shares were locked up, and for a while, I couldn't even pay rent. That's when Claire said she needed space. Space turned into silence. Silence turned into divorce. And I let her go, thinking maybe that was life's way of cleaning out the poison. But life had other plans. 3 months after the divorce, I got the call, my father's estate was finalized. I was now worth $15 million. It felt surreal, like life had finally thrown me a lifeline after nearly drowning me. But money doesn't just change your life, it exposes the truth about the people in it. Because the moment the news hit public record, Claire came back. With a smile. With tears. With apologies rehearsed so perfectly I almost believed her for a second. She said she missed me. Said she was lost without me. Said she just wanted to talk. And that's what brought us to tonight, standing in the living room where we once promised forever, now arguing about a fortune she didn't earn and a love she never meant. You know, people always say money can't buy happiness. But I've learned something darker, money can buy masks, and some people wear them so well, you forget who they really are underneath. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was realizing she never existed in the first place. That's when I decided I wouldn't just fight back, I'd expose her. Not for the money, but for the truth. Because somewhere out there, another man might be falling for her lies. Another heart might be getting lined up for her next payday. And I wasn't going to let that happen. When I looked out the window that night, rain hitting the glass, I remembered my father's words again. Son, if you ever want to know who someone really is, tell them no. So that's exactly what I did. I told Claire no. No, she couldn't manipulate me anymore. No, she couldn't twist the past into a payment. No, she wouldn't take 1 cent from what my father worked for his entire life. And that no broke her. Her tears turned into threats. Her voice turned into venom. She said she'd ruin me, that she'd make sure everyone knew I abused her, that she'd drag my name through the dirt until I begged her to settle quietly. But I wasn't the same man she once controlled. This time, I had something she didn't, the truth. And truth, once spoken out loud, burns through every lie like fire through paper. I learned something that night, something I want every man, every woman, every broken soul listening to remember. Love built on greed isn't love at all. The next morning, the house felt colder. It wasn't the kind of cold that comes from the weather, it was the silence that follows destruction. You know that moment after a bomb goes off, when the dust settles, and you finally realize what's been lost? That's what my living room looked like. Torn papers, broken glass, a coffee mug still lying sideways on the rug. The physical aftermath of emotional war. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there in the dark, listening to the rain hit the windows, wondering how someone I once loved enough to marry could turn into my worst enemy. I wasn't angry anymore. I was empty. I made coffee around 5 a.m., black and bitter, the way my father used to drink it. He always said, if you can't handle bitterness, you'll never survive business. I never understood what he meant until now. By 7, I was already on the phone with my lawyer. Evan, listen to me, he said, voice calm and cautious. If she's threatening legal action, don't confront her again directly. Let me handle it. I leaned against the counter, watching steam rise from the cup. She said she's going to tell everyone I abused her. She's already twisting the story. That's what people like her do, he replied. They weaponize sympathy. You have money now, that makes you the villain in her version of the story. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So I'm the bad guy because I didn't stay broke? Exactly. That was the moment I realized the fight wasn't just about money, it was about reputation. Claire wasn't after my inheritance because she needed it. She wanted to destroy me for walking away richer, stronger, and unbroken. 3 days later, I got served. A man in a brown jacket knocked on my door and handed me a thick envelope. Mr. Cole, he asked. I nodded. You've been served. Inside were pages of accusations so absurd they almost made me laugh until I realized how dangerous they were. False claims of emotional abuse, manipulation, neglect. She wanted spousal support, half the inheritance, and damages for mental anguish. I sat down on the couch, reading every line until the words blurred together. It felt like someone had rewritten my life into a horror story and cast me as the monster. You think you know pain until your truth gets twisted into lies and the world starts believing them. That night, I opened my laptop and saw her post on social media. A long caption, dripping with fake pain, talking about healing from emotional trauma and finding strength after years of silence. It had hundreds of comments, all from strangers calling me a narcissist, an abuser, a thief. I didn't even respond. Because deep down, I knew defending yourself in public only makes you look guilty. But I couldn't stop thinking, how did we get here? How did love turn into this kind of hate? When Claire and I first met, it wasn't all bad. She worked as a marketing assistant at a local firm, and I was still trying to get my construction start up off the ground. I didn't have much, just a small apartment, a beat-up truck, and a dream I could barely afford. She made me feel seen. Encouraged me. Told me I was destined for more. For a while, she believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. But something changed after we got married. She started comparing us to other couples. Look at how they live, she'd say, scrolling through her phone. They travel every month. They have a house on the lake. Why can't we have that? I tried explaining that real success takes time, but she didn't want patience, she wanted proof. And when the proof didn't come fast enough, her love started fading like cheap paint in the sun. She began treating my effort like failure. My long hours like neglect. Every dream I chased became a reminder of what we didn't have yet. And when my father got sick, she got distant. I thought she couldn't handle the pressure, but now I realize she just couldn't handle waiting for the payoff. The night she left, she didn't even cry. She just said, "I can't keep living like this," packed her bags, and walked out. And stupid me, I let her. Because I still believed people could change. After the inheritance came through, everything changed again, but not in the way I expected. My phone started blowing up. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my name. Old friends wanted to catch up. Even distant cousins I didn't know existed sent long, heartfelt messages that all ended with, "By the way, can you help me out with something?" Money doesn't just attract opportunity, it attracts hunters. And my ex-wife was the most dangerous one of all. A week after I was served, I met with my lawyer again. He flipped through the documents, shaking his head. "She's claiming she helped you build your business. But there's no record of her working with you." "She didn't," I said. "She just complained that I worked too much." He smirked. "Then we'll prove that." "But Evan, she's not doing this just for money. She's trying to ruin your credibility." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because you moved on," he said simply. "People like her can't stand seeing someone they discarded rise higher without them. It makes them question everything they built their identity on." That hit me harder than I expected. Because he was right. Claire didn't want justice, she wanted validation. And I wasn't going to give it to her. 2 weeks later, I saw her again, for the first time since the fight. We were both required to attend a preliminary hearing. She showed up dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine, pearl earrings, black heels, crocodile tears already rehearsed. When our eyes met, she gave me this tiny smile, half smug, half sad. Like she was saying, "I've already won." But she didn't know me anymore. The judge asked a few questions, then postponed the session for discovery. But what stayed with me wasn't what she said, it was how she looked at me when we left the courtroom. There was a flicker of fear there. Like she realized I wasn't going to fold this time. Outside, she caught up to me. "You don't have to make this ugly, Evan," she said softly, like she was offering peace. I turned to her, my voice calm but firm. "You already did that the moment you filed those lies." She smiled faintly. "I told you once I'd get what I deserve. Don't make me prove it. Then I guess I'll see you in court." For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. That night, I went home and sat in my father's study. The room still smelled like old books and cigar smoke, like the past hadn't realized he was gone yet. I opened his journal, something I'd been too afraid to touch since the funeral, and found a note scribbled in his handwriting. "When people try to take what isn't theirs, don't fight them with anger. Fight them with truth. It's the only weapon that never misses." I closed the book and exhaled. That was my answer. I wasn't going to play her game. I was going to expose it. So I started digging. Emails. Financial records. Photos. Messages. Anything that showed who Claire really was. Not the sweet, broken victim she pretended to be online, but the manipulative, calculated woman who plotted every step of this ambush long before she left me. And what I found? It was worse than I imagined. Hidden accounts. Secret credit cards. A trail of messages between her and a man she swore was just a friend. She wasn't just after my money, she was building a life with someone else while she was still with me. That night, something inside me hardened. I realized I wasn't fighting to protect my inheritance anymore. I was fighting to reclaim my story. Because when someone lies about you loud enough, long enough, the truth starts to sound like a whisper. And I wasn't going to let mine be drowned out. They say heartbreak changes a person. But betrayal? That rewires your soul. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. The softness was gone. The doubt was gone. All that was left was purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Because sometimes, the only way to stop a liar is to shine a light so bright they have nowhere left to hide. They say the courtroom is where justice lives, but they're wrong. In the modern world, justice doesn't begin with a judge, it begins with the crowd. With the posts, the likes, the viral sympathy. And Claire? She knew exactly how to play that game. It started with one post. A long, emotional message with a blurry picture of her crying. The caption read, "Healing is hard. Especially when the person who broke you pretends to be the victim." She didn't say my name, she didn't have to. Within hours, the comments flooded in. People tagging me. Strangers calling me a monster. Women praising her bravery. The story spread faster than the truth ever could. I remember staring at my phone screen, feeling my stomach twist into knots. It's strange watching your reputation burn while you're still alive to feel it. The internet doesn't wait for proof, it just picks a side. And once it does, the truth doesn't matter anymore. By the next morning, local blogs were running the story. Wealthy businessman accused of emotional abuse by ex-wife. My face was everywhere, my father's company name dragged through the mud. Clients started calling, asking questions I couldn't answer. A few even paused contracts, just to wait until things cleared up. Claire didn't just want money, she wanted to take everything my father and I built. The worst part wasn't the lies. It was the silence from people who knew me. Friends who had been to our house, shared dinners with us, laughed at our table, now avoiding my calls, afraid to get involved. That's when I realized something: when your life catches fire, most people don't bring water. They bring popcorn. I tried to stay calm. I kept reminding myself of what my father wrote: fight with truth, not anger. But it's hard to stay noble when someone is publicly crucifying your name. I met with my lawyer again, and he said, "She's trying to force a settlement. She knows public pressure can scare you into paying her to make it stop." "Then she doesn't know me," I said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "Then how do you plan to fight back?" "With the one thing she can't fake: evidence." So I started gathering everything I had. The emails where she admitted to cheating. The messages where she bragged to her friends about how easy it was going to be to manipulate the divorce. The bank statements showing she drained our joint account days before leaving me. Every line of proof was another piece of armor. But as I dug deeper, I uncovered something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't doing this alone. There was another man, her boyfriend, who was helping her spread the lies. He worked in PR, the same field she came from. Together, they were crafting a narrative, building a digital army of sympathy, turning me into the villain of their fairy tale. That's when it hit me: this wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a brand campaign, and I was the target. One evening, I was at a diner on the outskirts of town. I just needed air, a place where nobody recognized me. That's when I heard a voice behind me say, "You don't deserve what's happening to you." I turned around. It was a young waitress, maybe 24, with kind eyes. "You're Evan Cole, right?" "I've seen the posts," she said softly. "I don't believe them." That moment hit me harder than I expected. Not because of what she said, but because it reminded me that truth still had witnesses even if they were few. She told me her name was Maya. She'd seen Claire around town before shopping, talking loudly about her pain, always making sure someone was listening. "She doesn't look broken," Maya said. "She looks like she's performing." That word, performing, stuck with me all night. Because that's exactly what Claire was doing. She wasn't just lying, she was putting on a show. And I decided it was time I showed the audience what really went on behind the curtain. The next few weeks became a blur of strategy. I hired a small media consultant, someone who knew how to handle reputation crises. We started leaking documents, quiet truths, screenshots. Nothing aggressive. Just facts. We didn't attack her. We didn't insult her. We simply showed evidence of who she really was. And slowly, people began to notice the inconsistencies. Her stories didn't add up. Her timelines didn't match. Someone even found out she had been vacationing in Cabo while she claimed to be recovering from trauma. The same followers who once worshipped her started asking questions. The tide didn't turn overnight, but it began to shift. And Claire? She panicked. She called me one night, first time in months. Her voice was calm at first, too calm. "Evan, what are you doing?" she asked. I paused. "Telling the truth." She laughed, that same cold, mocking laugh I once mistook for confidence. "You think anyone's going to care about your screenshots?" "I own the narrative." "Not for long," I said. "Truth takes longer, but it lasts longer too." Her tone changed instantly. "You're making a mistake. You're going to regret this." "No," I said quietly. "You are." She hung up. That was the last time she ever called me without a lawyer on the line. A few days later, the legal storm began. She filed a defamation suit, claiming my evidence was fabricated. The irony was almost poetic, the liar suing for being exposed. But instead of fear, I felt something else, clarity. Because I had the receipts. Every file, every date, every message was backed by truth. When we entered the courtroom, she looked flawless, confident, and well prepared. She smiled for the cameras outside like she was walking into a movie premiere. But when the judge started questioning her, her mask began to crack. Her dates didn't line up. Her story contradicted itself. My lawyer presented the evidence with calm precision, and every word out of her mouth only dug her hole deeper. By the time it was over, her expression was unrecognizable, that mixture of fear and disbelief you see when someone realizes their lies have expired. The judge dismissed her claim. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. But peace doesn't come cheap. Even though the court saw through her lies, the damage was already done. Some people still believed her. Some always would. That's the thing about rumors, even when the truth wins, the stain remains. I lost friends. I lost business. I lost time I could never get back. But what I gained was something more important. Perspective. Strength. Freedom. Because once someone tries to destroy you, and you survive, nothing scares you anymore. I realized that I wasn't fighting for my father's inheritance anymore. I was fighting for the right to tell my story, without someone else writing it for me. When I walked out of that courtroom, Maya was waiting outside. She smiled, holding a small to-go cup. "Coffee," she said. "Figured you'd need it." I smiled for the first time in months. "You have no idea." She handed me the cup. "People finally saw who she really is," she said. "Feels good, doesn't it?" I nodded slowly. "It does. But it also hurts. Because the truth shouldn't have to fight this hard to be believed." She looked at me for a moment and said something I'll never forget: "That's because lies sound better. But truth lasts longer." She was right. That night, I sat in my father's study again. Same room, same quiet. I placed the old journal back on the desk and whispered, "You were right, Dad. You always were." And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a survivor. Because when someone tries to take your name, your money, and your peace, and you still walk away with your integrity, that's real wealth. You can lie for a while, you can even convince the world, but the truth, it always waits. It doesn't rush, it doesn't shout. It just sits quietly in the corner until the lights go out, and then it shows up, uninvited, unstoppable. It had been nearly 6 months since the first accusation. 6 months of lawyers, statements, and sleepless nights. But the silence that followed the trial wasn't peace, it was the calm before something bigger. Because Claire wasn't done yet. People like her never accept losing, they just find new ways to fight dirty. She went back online, posting cryptic things like, "Some people win in court but lose their soul." She didn't use my name, but she didn't have to. The intent was clear. It was her last attempt to keep her audience, to hold on to the sympathy she'd built her identity around. But something had changed this time. People weren't buying it anymore. They'd seen the contradictions, the evidence, the way she dodged every direct question. Slowly, the comments shifted. Didn't she get caught lying in court? Why does she keep bringing it up? If she's healing, why is she still obsessed with him? Her followers started leaving. Sponsors she'd worked with pulled away. Even her PR boyfriend stopped showing up in her posts. The empire she built on lies was starting to collapse, and she could feel it. One afternoon, I was driving through downtown when I saw her by accident. She was sitting outside a cafe, alone. No camera, no entourage, no designer bag. Just her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. There was no anger left in me. Just sadness. Because as much as I hated what she did, I couldn't ignore what she'd become, a prisoner of her own performance. I parked my car, stepped out, and walked over. She looked up, startled. "Evan," she whispered. I nodded. "Claire." For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Two people who used to be everything to each other, now standing on opposite ends of a battlefield we both helped build. "You look different," she said quietly. "So do you." She gave a bitter smile. "Guess we both changed." "Change isn't the same as breaking," I said. "You chose to destroy what you had." She looked away. "You think I wanted all this? You think I wanted to be hated?" "No," I said softly. "I think you wanted to be worshipped. And when you couldn't have that, you chose attention instead." Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, I saw something real: regret, maybe. Or exhaustion. "You ruined me," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, Claire. You ruined yourself." I just stopped pretending it wasn't happening. The silence that followed felt heavy. The kind that comes when there's nothing left to say, only truths too sharp to speak out loud. She finally asked, "Why didn't you ever fight me the way I fought you?" "You had the proof. You could have destroyed me completely." I looked her in the eyes and said, "Because I didn't need to win against you. I just needed to win myself back." That hit her harder than anything I could have shouted. She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment, she wasn't the cold manipulator anymore. She was just a human being, cornered by her own choices. "Do you still hate me?" she asked, her voice breaking. I took a deep breath. "No. I don't hate you. I pity you. Because you had everything: the love, the loyalty, the life, and you threw it away for the illusion of more. And now, even with all the lies, you're still empty." A tear slid down her cheek. "I thought if I made you hurt, it would make me feel better." "Did it?" She shook her head slowly. "No. It just made me smaller." That conversation ended the war. Not with a bang, not with a courtroom victory, but with silence, with two broken people realizing that no one truly wins when love turns to vengeance. When I left that cafe, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter was closed. But as I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about how thin the line is between love and destruction. How someone you once trusted with your heart can turn it into a weapon. And how sometimes, the only way to heal is to walk away from the person who taught you how to hurt. Weeks passed, and slowly, life started to feel normal again. The company stabilized. My name cleared. And for the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what someone did to me, I was defined by what I survived. Maya and I kept in touch. She'd check in now and then, always with that calm energy that made everything feel lighter. One evening, she invited me to a local charity event for victims of false accusations. I wasn't sure I wanted to go, but she said something that stuck with me: you've lived this, Evan. Maybe your story could help someone else survive it. So I went. Standing there, in a small community hall filled with people carrying invisible scars, I told my story for the first time publicly. Not to get sympathy. Not to clear my name. But to remind others that they weren't alone. I told them how betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your faith. How money doesn't create greed, it reveals it. And how sometimes, the people who smile the brightest are the ones who hide the darkest intentions. When I finished, there was silence. Then applause. Not loud, not theatrical, just warm. Real. The kind that tells you your pain finally meant something. Afterward, Maya walked up and said, "That's the best thing you've done since this all started." "What's that?" I asked. "Turned your story into someone else's survival guide." That night, for the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. The next morning, I got an email from Claire. No drama. No manipulation. Just a single paragraph. "Evan, I wanted you to know I'm leaving the city. I've lost everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you find peace. Maybe someday, I'll find it too. Claire." I stared at the screen for a long time. And then, I hit delete. Not out of anger, but closure. Because some doors aren't meant to be reopened, even for apologies. You know, people always say money changes people. But that's not true. It doesn't change you, it just shows you who you already were. Claire's greed exposed her emptiness. My pain exposed my strength. And somewhere in between, I found my truth. When I visit my father's grave now, I don't talk about the money or the company. I talk about what he taught me, that character outlives wealth, and that integrity is the only inheritance worth passing on. I stand there, looking at his name carved in stone, and I whisper, "You were right, Dad. The truth really does win eventually." Then I smile, because I know he'd be proud. They say rock bottom teaches you lessons that success never can. And they're right. Because standing among the ruins of everything I'd lost, I found something I never expected: peace. Months had passed since I'd last seen Claire. Her name stopped echoing in my head, her face no longer haunted my dreams. The headlines died down, the lawyers moved on, and the world forgot what happened. But I didn't forget. Not out of anger, but gratitude. Because that storm forced me to rebuild myself from the ground up. I sold the mansion that once felt like a museum of memories and moved into a quiet house overlooking the lake. It wasn't big, but it was mine. The kind of place where silence doesn't feel empty, it feels earned. Every morning, I'd wake before sunrise, pour a cup of coffee, and sit on the porch watching the sky change colors. It became my ritual, my reminder that no matter how dark the night, the light always returns. I started painting again. Something I hadn't done since college. My hands were rusty at first, but each stroke pulled me closer to myself. Pain transformed into color. Regret turned into expression. And somehow, through art, I found healing. That's when Maya started visiting more often. She said she wanted to buy one of my paintings for her office, but I think she just didn't want me to isolate myself. She'd bring tea, stories about her day, and that calm energy that filled the air like music. One evening, as the sun melted into the lake, she looked at one of my unfinished canvases and said, "You know, this one looks different." "How so?" I asked. "It doesn't look sad anymore. It looks alive." I smiled quietly. Maybe because I finally am. We spent hours that evening just talking about everything and nothing. For the first time in years, I wasn't being studied, judged, or manipulated. I was just seen. Maya never asked for details about my past. She didn't need to. She saw the scars but didn't try to fix them. She just accepted them as part of the painting that made me who I was. And that's how real healing begins, not when someone saves you, but when they sit beside you while you save yourself. One day, she brought up an idea. "You should start a foundation," she said. "For people who've been through what you went through: false accusations, financial manipulation, emotional abuse. You could give them hope. At first, I laughed it off. Me? A foundation? Why not? She smiled. You've already lived the story. Now, help others rewrite theirs. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. So I did. I called it the Phoenix Project because it was about people who lost everything but refused to stay ashes. Within months, it grew. Survivors reached out, donations poured in, and we started supporting victims who were too afraid to speak. Seeing others rise from their pain gave my own suffering a purpose. It turned what once felt meaningless into something deeply meaningful. One evening, during our first charity gala, Maya found me standing by the balcony, staring at the city lights. Big night, she said, smiling. Yeah. Never thought I'd make it here again. Life's funny like that, she replied softly. It breaks you just enough to rebuild you better. I looked at her then, not the way you look at someone who walks into your life, but the way you look at someone who stayed when everyone else left. I said, for a long time I thought love was about grand gestures and promises. But maybe, it's about peace. About feeling safe to be yourself again. She smiled gently. And do you feel safe now? I nodded. For the first time in years. The night ended with a quiet dance. No cameras, no spotlight, just music, laughter, and the quiet realization that love wasn't gone from my story. It had simply been waiting for the right chapter to return. A year later, I stood once more at my father's grave. The lake breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves, and I brought a small framed photo with me. It was of our first Phoenix Project team. I placed it beside the gravestone and said, Dad, you always said I'd learn more from losing everything than from gaining it. You were right. I lost a marriage, money, my peace, but I found my purpose. I paused, looking up at the sky. I finally understand now, it's not about the inheritance you left me. It's about the integrity you taught me. As I turned to leave, I caught the faint reflection of the lake, the sunlight shimmering across the surface like gold. And in that light, I saw what I'd become, not a victim, not a survivor, but a man reborn. That's the thing about pain. It doesn't disappear, it transforms. And if you let it, it becomes the fire that forges who you're meant to be. Claire's betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was just the plot twist I needed to find my true self. Sometimes life burns your plans to the ground so you can rise from the ashes stronger, wiser, and freer. The people who betray you don't define your ending, they reveal your beginning. My name is Evan, and I lost everything to someone who pretended to love me. But in losing her, I found everything that truly matters: truth, peace, and a love that feels like home.